She should be here any minute.
She won't want it.
What are you talking about?
Her style has changed.
How would you know?
She likes an edgier look.
Here she is.
Fairy Godmother!
Cinderella, I have something for you.
Oh, thank you so much, Fairy Godmother, but I think I've outgrown this.
Told you.
Well, what about your console table? Would you like it for your new apartment?
Actually, I was wondering if you might be willing to conjure up something a little more cool.
Cool?
Maybe darker.
Darker?
Yeah, maybe with a little boho flavor.
Ooh.
Yeah, maybe black.
Black?
Excellent.
My dear, you got it. Hi everyone, I'm Andy. Welcome to part 2 of a very special Furniture Fairy Fables. In the same way that my generation rejected that orangey oak so beloved by our parents' generation, so our kids are not so enthralled with the lighter, brighter paints and stains. Instead, their aesthetic seems to favor darker, more dramatic stains and the very ultra-modern black paint treatments. While this may be a fleeting trend, sometimes trends find traction, and so the modern flipper may do well working this darker modern design into their repertoire. The good news is, just like our console table, we can use a one medium technique to give our younger, hipper friends the look that they'd like. And so we continue with part 2 of the magic of the modern neutral, the dark side.
I picked up these 2 matching end tables from a nearby town for free. Like many 80s pieces of furniture, their owner was struggling to find a new place for them to land that was not the local dump. They had the standard 80s issues. Their oak veneers were stained a bright orange, and their top inserts were that very familiar smoky brownish glass. But their silhouettes were kind of cool, and their chunky geometric shape reminded me of end tables I had seen lately at Anthropologie and Crate and Barrel, sculptural tables in various levels of black stain, all with all kinds of wood grain showing through. So, with my inspiration in my head, I began. I started by removing those glass tops. I had an idea on how I could up their cool factor, but that would need to wait for now. I mixed up a big bucket of warm water and Dawn dishwashing soap and started scrubbing. While checking underneath the tables, I discovered several spider egg sacs. This is why it is super important to always look under your pieces. After I thoroughly rinsed the tables, I dried them off and then left them in the sun so that they could get completely dry. And then it was time for Sandapalooza. I started with a 100 grit disc on my orbital sander, but quickly saw that it really wasn't doing much with this factory varnish, so I switched over to a 60 grit. At this point, I wasn't sure if I wanted to achieve a 2 finish look similar to the console table in part 1 of our Furniture Fairy Fable, or if I wanted to do a more consistent all-over stained or paint-washed look. So because of that, I decided to sand off as much of that original finish as I could. I switched over to my SurfPrep electric ray and began moving methodically up the grit levels, sanding out all of the scratches and dings, and taking more and more of that old orange finish off. Periodically, I would stop and use my hand broom to sweep off a majority of the dust so I could really see how the wood was looking. I used a light hand and carefully watched for any sign of blowing through those veneers. And just little by little got that first table completely sanded. Phew! So here she is next to her twin sister, sporting the raw look. I have to say that first table looked so nice this way that I was a little tempted to keep her that way, but I had made a promise. So I brought that first table over to the other side of the house and gave it a good spray down with some water so I could wipe up all of the remaining dust. With a table like this one that has all that curved trim on that top, it's so easy for dust to settle and hide, and so sometimes I find that using a spray bottle is the best way to make sure I've gotten all of that dust out of those grooves. Now it was time to make my potion. I decided to use the color Coal Black by Fusion Mineral Paint. This is a gorgeous, true black with a very natural toned finish, so I thought it would be perfect for my Anthropologie-inspired look. I mixed up a 1-to-1 blend of paint and water. You'll notice that the wash has a bluish tint to it, and that's completely normal and not at all uncommon with black paints before they've dried. And then using my trusty Zibra chiseled wedge brush, I tested it out on one of the table legs. After wiping back that first application, I decided that this look, while kind of beautiful, was not exactly the look I wanted to achieve. So I added some more paint to my mixture so that it was more similar to what I had done with the console table, 2 parts paint to 1 part water, and then started applying my new, stronger paint wash. As I went, I used my lint-free cloths to wipe back the black paint wash in the direction of the wood grain. Again, you can see how blue the wash was looking, but do not fear, as it dries, it loses all traces of that blue and a gorgeous black color will appear. As I worked, I could tell pretty quickly that the different veneers that had been used on this table were behaving very differently with this wash. This is not uncommon, and I wasn't too surprised. That's the thing about wood as a product. It's very much like people. It has its own personality, and it is somewhat unpredictable. And that's why it's also good to have a backup plan should your first idea start to prove too difficult to achieve. As I started in on the sanding of the second table, I knew I was going to probably paint those legs and the base frames with solid paint. And so I was able to save a little time and not do as thorough of a sanding job as I had done on that first table. I brought the twin sister over to the other side of the house to give her dust removal shower, and then began the second paint wash. I went ahead and applied that paint wash everywhere on the table, sort of thinking about it as a mini primer for the pure paint I knew I would add later to the legs and the base. Then I brought back out my SurfPrep sander again to do a little detail work. Using a super fine grit pad, I went around the curved edges of that top trim to remove some of the paint wash, and it started to have the effect I was going for, an almost charred look. If you've seen people color wood with a blowtorch lately, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you would like to try to achieve a similar look, albeit not exact, of course, you can come pretty close with this technique. When we sand light or white paint, we get that aged or distressed look. When we sand black paint, we get this gorgeous, dramatic, charred effect. So cool. Now, how much or how little you want to lean into this effect is, of course, totally up to you. Let your inner artist experiment and see what you like. And if, like me, you feel maybe you removed a little too much of the paint wash, you can, of course, just come back in with the same strength and repeat that wash process. Or you can do this little trick that I did. I watered down some of my wash to create an especially watery version, and then used that over the top areas I had just sanded. This took down that brightness of the wood that I had just uncovered, but still left that rugged, charred effect. Then I got out my coal black in its original strength and painted all the legs, inside and outsides, as well as the base frame and top frame. Because of those very grainy veneers, I knew we would still be able to see the wood grain coming through that black paint, and so really effectively staying on course with our Anthropologie crate and barrel inspiration tables. And just like with part 1 of this fable, this is such a forgiving technique. Because of how difficult it would be to cut into where the inner legs met that lower table level, and because of how difficult it would have been to evenly sand those spots on the lower level of the table where they met the inside of the legs, I decided to do this little trick, make sort of a faux paint line barrier. I knew this would make my life so much easier in terms of where the two finishes met up with each other. Again, those transitions are the hardest part. And also, this would probably look kind of fabulous, sort of reinforcing our hexagonal silhouette. Using my painter's tape as a guide to create a consistent width for that tape offline, I created my tape barrier and then used my Zibra square brush to paint that lower level section in solid coal black. Then I repeated that same treatment on the sister table. You can also see how I was able to seamlessly and much more easily blend that solid paint up onto the inner part of the table leg. Always think about your finished transition points and balance your decisions about what to do between what you think will look best for your piece and also what is reasonably doable for you. Oftentimes, there are simple changes that we can make that make a world of difference in the difficulty of our work and may even add to the beauty of our pieces. At this point, I stood back and looked at my tables and decided I needed to check something out. I put one glass insert onto one of the tables and realized that raw wood on the underneath part of the table that was visible through the glass from some angles now looked pretty conspicuous. So I first snipped off those annoying little black strings that were hanging around, and then I painted that inside part. Unfortunately, I didn't notice that my camera had died, so I didn't get that on film. Okay, now it was time for some real magic. I took the glass tops over to our utility sink and gave them a good cleaning with warm water and some more Dawn soap. And then I laid them out on the dining table on top of a towel. For our boho chic enthusiast, I conjured up this fantastic transfer from Redesign with Prima. This is their Folk 2 pattern. It comes with 3 patterned sheets and a transfer stick. Looking at what I had to work with and the shapes of my 2 glass tops, I came up with a design plan. Measuring the width of the glass, I found center and then laid out that first piece, smoothing it out with my hands, and then starting to use the rubbing stick to rub down the transfers and slowly peeling back the paper. When you're doing transfers, you want to just take your time, go slow, and as you peel back that paper, if you see any little bits of the design that didn't come off, you can just lay the paper back down and use your stick to rub the transfer onto your surface. You can see as I do the second glass top how the transfer color changes as it attaches to the glass surface. Transfers are a really fun product to work with. You, of course, can apply them directly to wood furniture. People put them on to fabric, and they also work on glass. Once I had those 2 big sections of the transfers applied, I began to burnish them down. I used a paper towel and just rubbed over every individual transfer. You can really see in these close-ups the difference. After I burnish the transfers, those edges become almost invisible. I realized one of my patterns had a little bit of extra design. You'd be surprised how often I do something silly like this. So it's no big deal. I just used a painter's tool to scrape off that extra little bit. Then I cut up my remaining bit of transfer and created a design for the bottom of the glass. That's another great thing about these transfers. You can really customize them to suit your needs for whatever you are designing. The 2 patterns on the lower edge of the tables are actually slightly different, but this won't be noticeable. And honestly, I think it's kind of cool that way. Then I did some last little sanding to smooth out any roughness that the paint wash may have brought up, as well as to smooth out that line between the solid painted line and the washed level. And then I brought the tables inside and wiped them down thoroughly with a tack cloth. and then I got out my wax. Keeping it simple, I used Dixie Belle's Easy Peasy Wax Spray. Gosh, I love this stuff. And I rubbed it in with a lint-free rag. This is such a great, simple, straightforward way to finish a piece like this with the two finish effect. And wax just makes the black paint look incredible. I let that easy peasy wax dry for about 6 hours, and then finally it was time to put the glass tops back in and give them one last little shine up with some glass cleaner. Spit spot. Oh, sorry, that's someone else. Okay, do you remember our oaky and orange, smoky and scuffed up 80s end tables? And bippity, boppity, black magic, boom. My. Well, hello there. Is there anything more stunning than the little black dress? Our two ladies' gorgeous faux charred trims are echoed and highlighted with their boho chic transfers as they subtly peek through the underside of their glass tops. Their lower levels are a lovely mix of a rustic dark wash and a sleek border outline. The solid black painted base and legs elevate the way only black can, while still showing off that organic wood grain, creating that perfect design juxtaposition of elegance and rustic. And don't blink, my friends, or you'll miss my last bit of magic. If one prefers a little bit of white, their glass tops, of course, can be flipped over to reveal the brighter side of the transfers. Still a total celebration of neutrals, the white design is a lovely contrast to the faux charred top and black bases and legs. I believe these two stepsisters have stepped out of the princess's shadow.
These two tables, they make me wish I had a studio where I could really style them up. They looked so cool. But let's get down to business. If I hadn't done the transfer on the glass tops, my cost for these two tables would have been pretty much the same as it was for that console table. Half a jar of paint, a little bit of tape, some sanding discs, and wax for sealing. And that comes out to about $22. But I did zhuzh them up a little bit with that transfer. This one was right at $27, so that puts my total cost right at about $50. Now, these tables took me a good 7 hours to complete. That was a little bit because I did sort of experiment with how intense I wanted that black paint wash to be, but a lot of it was just because there were two of them, and that was how long it took. Given how long they took to complete, and also the fact that the tables they were inspired by start at about $300 for one, I came up with a list price of $350, which will give me a profit of $300.
I liked these.
Yes, I thought you might.
Maybe I'll keep them.
I believe she is taking them to her new place. Oh, Cinderella, don't forget your animals, dear.
Oh, sorry, Fairy Godmother. My new place doesn't accept mice.
Of course they don't. Text me when you get there and send a picture of the tables.
She'll be fine.
I know.
So what will you make next?
I have some ideas, but first,
Yes?
I think we need a vacation.
Excellent.
Of course, we'll need to get everything squared away first.
It'll be
Oh,
fine.
maybe that terrible cat of yours could bring up the mail.
He won't. I know, darling. He won't.
And we'll need someone to stop by and feed the mice, or they'll just order takeout the whole time.
Have a drink.
We get sunscreen, you know I need at least a 50.
I think all the sanding dust and the paint fumes have finally cooked your brain, darling.
I hope you have enjoyed this Furniture Fairy Fable, as well as the other Furniture Fables that have made it my very first season here on YouTube. I will be taking a short break, but will be returning soon. I have a lot more ideas to share and stories to tell you. So thank you once more for joining me, my Furniture Fable friends. I will see you next time for more Furniture Fables.